Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Answer Me Charlie. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to hit that red subscribe button. There's a lot going on in my world these days. Got a lot of exciting news to share and new videos coming all the time. And if you subscribe, you'll be among the first to know about everything happening in my world. Let's jump into the questions. First, we got one from Amanda PMCD. If you could time travel back to meet a country bluegrass legend, who would you choose? Oh, it's a great question, Amanda. What's crazy about my life is I've actually ended up crossing paths with a lot of my country and bluegrass heroes. Specific to bluegrass, when I was 10 years old, I stood on the Ryman stage with the king of bluegrass, Jimmy Martin. Probably my favorite of the old school bluegrassers. I mean, that dude was a rock star. And I was on stage with him, my banjo teacher, Larry Wallace, who played in Jimmy's band for 10 years, and the great Tom T. Hall. And that was a moment I'll never forget. We played Will the Circle Be Unbroken together. And that was my first time to stand on the Ryman stage. A few years later, I was in college, and my college gave an honorary doctorate to the great Earl Scruggs. And I ended up standing next to Earl Scruggs, playing that same song, Will the Circle Be Unbroken, and of course, Foggy Mountain Breakdown. Even got Earl's autograph to prove that I was there on stage with him. But if you're talking about country and bluegrass singers who have already passed away, who I didn't get a chance to meet, it'd be hard not to pick Hank Williams Sr. because what a fascinating life, and I just think getting to pick his brain on songwriting would be a priceless experience. I'm a big Ernest Tubb fan. It'd be hard not to pick him, but I'd have to go back and meet Ernest Tubb at his Ernest Tubb record shop, one of my favorite places in the world to buy vinyl records. But you know who I'm going to go with? Probably somebody you wouldn't think of first as a country singer so much as a soulful, one of the most popular vocalists of all time. But his album, Modern Sounds in Country and Western Music, is probably the most consequential country record, at least in my opinion. So I'm going to go with Ray Charles. I would love to jam with Ray Charles. Are you kidding me? That would just be the best. Thanks for the question, Amanda. All right, from Bishop Sanders. What's your all-time favorite song? Bishop, that's an impossible question for me to answer, so I'll do you one better. I'll tell you my all-time favorite story about a mistake made in the recording studio that ended up on the record, and it pertains to the title track of my Sugarcane EP, Sugarcane. So I worked with Jay Joyce on this project, and we cut a lot of the 6 songs kind of rocking live as a band. I was standing up, playing guitar, and singing at the same time. And we did this take of Sugarcane that eventually became the take that we used as the basis for the track. And at the end of the first chorus, you know, nothing makes gooder, quite like sugar cane. And I take the guitar and I go, woo-doo-doo, beep, boop, boo. And that note right there, I slid into the wrong note. Boo. But I bent it into the right place eventually. And as soon as I played it, I thought to myself, I got to replace that. And as soon as we hit stop to listen back to the take, Jay was like, you got to keep that little thing that you just did. That was great, man. You got to keep that. And not only did we keep it, but I overdubbed an acoustic guitar. And when the electric goes, boo-doo-doo, beep, boop, boo, I go, boo, an octave lower on the acoustic. You can actually, if you listen real close, hear me laughing after bending that second note on the acoustic. I just thought it was hilarious that we're keeping a mistake like that in. And honestly, now that I hear it back, it's one of my favorite parts in the song. So there you go. Thanks for the question, Bishop. D1000000 asks, how was your Old Crow experience? Well, for those of you that don't know already, a lot of 2019 I spent not necessarily playing my own shows, but I joined up with Old Crow Medicine Show, and I also joined up in Vince Gill's band. And so my touring in 2019 was half Old Crow, half Vince Gill. And my Old Crow experience was a blast. Are you kidding me? We rang in the new year on the stage of the Ryman Auditorium. My sweet bride ran out on stage right at midnight, and we clinked champagne glasses and had a midnight kiss right there on the stage of the Mother Church. And I found in the guys in Old Crow these long-lost brothers I never had. I mean, Ketch, in particular, grew up listening to old-time music the way that I grew up listening to bluegrass music. And I thought I was nerdy and taking things old school. But a lot of the music that Ketch hit me to predates recording technology and had to be passed down person to person. and he is the current link in that chain. So it was a really cool thing to be around his energy and the energy of the band, hear stories from Corey about his father playing in Mel Tillis's band. Some of my favorite memories of those guys were, of course, on stage, but it was also after getting off stage, getting back on the bus and rolling to the next town, us hipping each other to new records and stuff, you know. And I have a sneaking suspicion, I got to spend a little bit of time in the band since they brought in Jerry Pentecost, who's one of my favorite people in this town. And I love Mike Harris, who's one of the newest members as well since my departure. But Mike and I have shared the stage playing Skinner nights at Basement East for Every Damn Monday. And so it's just this cool musical soup. And getting to say I was in Old Crow is a pretty cool feather in my hat. And I have this sneaking suspicion that in years to come, anytime you see my name and Old Crow's name on the same festival lineup, we'll be sharing each other's stages. Thanks for that question. All right, next up, Mikey Good Music asks, do you do session work for just anybody, like rednecks in Indiana about to record a Christmas song? Oh, Mikey, I'm so glad you asked that. That question reminds me of when I first started playing sessions, and it's a principle that holds true, and I guess you could call it a philosophy too. It's the process of where you start to where you want to end up. And with session work, it's interesting because I never want to say no to a session. But when I started out playing sessions, I had to say yes to everything. You know, even if I was getting called for, say, a mandolin part, and at the time I didn't play that much mandolin, I would say yes, and between the call and the session, I'd figure out how to play good enough mandolin that I could do decent mandolin playing on the session. But that's how most careers work. You know, you kind of have to start taking any job you can, and then you develop skills, you develop a reputation, and then you get so busy that you end up having to say no to some things. And I'm in a place right now where I have to say no more than I say yes, not because I don't want to play the sessions, but between making my own records and playing my own shows and playing on records for others, like the new Eric Church record and the upcoming Luke Combs record and the upcoming Dierks Bentley record, that Leslie Jordan gospel record and whatnot, there's a lot of stuff that I'm not able to do because I'm also a dad now, you know, and I have to always remember that writing my own songs and making my own records, that's the ultimate, you know, bullseye on my dartboard. That's the ultimate goal. So Mikey, I can't play on your overdub, but man, best of luck, Godspeed with that Christmas song, and I can't wait to hear it when it's out. Thanks for asking the question. All right, Amy CMB asks, would you ever give guitar or banjo lessons or do a masterclass kind of thing? You know, Amy, the crazy thing is I can't say that I will, but I kind of already do music education stuff through a couple of outlets. One being my hometown arts program, the Follow Your Heart Arts Program, which I just got back from Mississippi on a trip to spend time with the students in that program, and it was a really cool thing. I believe that teachers learn as much as the students they're teaching, and that certainly held true for my experience recently in Mississippi with Follow Your Heart. And, you know, I might have been showing kids a thing or two about how I shape a G chord, but more than that, it's sharing the wisdom that I've gleaned from the people I've been around in my life in music and passing that wisdom on down the way it was passed down to me. And some of it is technical, but a lot of it's philosophical. And I just love getting to do that, and I love the energy of people who are just starting out on an instrument. The world is just wide open for them still, you know. Not that it isn't further down the road, but I remember that feeling of playing a properly executed C chord for the first time and just feeling like I was on a roller coaster, you know, like I had somehow developed a magic trick. And I never want to lose that sense of wonder, and being around students really charges up the battery for me on my sense of wonder. But then also on TikTok, I've been doing a guitar lick of the week, and I'm loving that. It's kind of music education driven. And on occasion, I'll speak to students from my alma mater, from Berklee College of Music, or to students at Vanderbilt or wherever. You know, I love those kinds of opportunities. I don't have anything specific outside of Follow Your Heart, my TikToks, and the YouTube series I've been releasing to show folks how to play the songs on my EP. But I'm always looking for a one-off opportunity, so stay tuned on that one. All right, Matt X Nature asks, what would be your go-to suggestions for someone hitting Nashville for a short amount of time? Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. You just have to do it. It's a world-class museum, hands down, my favorite museum. I have not been yet to the National Museum of African American Music, but it's just down the street from the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, and I've heard really amazing things, and I think it's a really cool thing that that particular museum is planted right here in Nashville, Tennessee, with such a rich history, not just of country music, but all kinds of music. So I would put that on the list. Go catch a show at the Station Inn and order a thing of popcorn and a pitcher of beer, and if you're brave, one of their pizzas. If you're into tacos, Mas Tacos is like the old school East Nashville hip taco place. They make great tacos, cool experience and atmosphere. Not far from there is a newer place that does Austin style tacos that I love as well, called Redheaded Stranger. If you go to Redheaded Stranger, walk a block in the direction of the restaurant Folk, and across the street from Folk, on the side of this brick wall of an abandoned movie theater, you'll see a mural of a flower bouquet, a paint by numbers flower bouquet with text on one side that says "I like you," text on the other that says "I like you too." That's from my Half Drunk music video. So go get your picture in front of the Half Drunk mural. And outside of that, there's so much great stuff to see and do. Catch an Opry performance, great neighborhoods, great barbecue, Edley's, Martin's, all that kind of stuff. You can't go wrong. Just come on down to Nashville. If you're going to do the Lower Broadway honky tonks, though, I highly suggest be sure to hit Roberts and Layla's, and then go buy a record at Ernest Tubb Record Shop. Awesome. All right. Oh, D. James asks, what's the best thing about being a new dad? D, there's a million answers to that question, and they're all right. Bath time has been really fun here lately. Gabe really enjoys bath time, and I enjoy just talking to him while I'm giving him a bath. I talk to him like he's a grown-up, and just tell him stories, things that I love, things about my life, things that I hope for him. And I just believe babies understand us more than we give them credit for. But hands down, the best thing, especially these days, he's such a smiley baby. And in the morning when he hears your voice, hears Kristen's voice or my voice, or locks eyes with us and smiles, like, oh, that's game over every time. The other best thing about being a dad is how beautifully being a dad takes the spotlight off of you. And for someone who's in the spotlight a lot, that's been a really refreshing and healthy experience for me. And it reminds me how much I'm not in control, and I'm really cool with it because every day is an adventure, and I'm just I'm rolling with that and loving it. And I have a great partner in raising this kid. So, but yeah, Gabe smiles, hands down. Like that's the ticket right there. All right, Jack Schneider. Jack asked a couple questions, and Jack and I go back to 2019 on that tour with Vince Gill. He was one of the guitar techs on that tour while I was backing Vince up. And Jack is also a talented singer-songwriter in his own right and great guitar picker. We've played a gig or two together at the Station Inn. Jack had some great questions. I had to answer both of these. Favorite article of clothing you own? Jack, that question actually makes me think of the favorite article of clothing that I got rid of. So those of you who've been following me for a long time, back to my rubber band days, you will remember I used to wear orange Chuck Taylors everywhere, on every stage show, at every public event, and it was a thing, and it was cool, and I enjoyed it. But after a while, it felt like it was holding me back. Like, orange, first of all, is not a very flattering color that matches with a lot of things, and it was a thing where I really and truly I couldn't wear any other shoe, and I felt like people were more interested in that than my songs at one point. And so I broke up with the orange Chucks, and that took some time, and it caused a little bit of confusion for people. But I share that story to encourage anyone out there who maybe has the orange Chucks thing happening in their life. Maybe they feel like they're chained to a thing that isn't them, locked into something that just doesn't fit. Well, don't be afraid to do what you got to do to, get the bolt cutters out and break that connection if you need to do it. Because everything's fine now, and I wear all kinds of fun shoes, from Fry and All Saints boots to, I'm really into Vans sneakers now, and the dad shoes. That's a big one these days too. Jack also asked, is there a piece of advice you were given early in your career that stuck with you? this is something I've mentioned in a lot of interviews, but it bears repeating. Never be the best musician in your band, and that applies to any situation. If you can surround yourself with people who make you stand a little taller, you're going to always have some room to grow. You're going to be pushed to your edge, and that factor certainly I felt applied to me playing in Vince Gill's band in 2019. I think it made me do a better job as a singer on the Sugarcane EP that next year because I had been singing harmonies for Vince for a year. So that's a worthy piece of advice to share. And it actually applies to this next question from Dan Bankerman, favorite songwriter you've worked with. Dan, my favorite songwriters are those that make me stand a little taller when I walk in the room, and one of those guys would have to be Tom Douglas. I'm such a fan of his. And then other favorite songwriters of mine to collaborate with are just buddies. Like I was neighbors with Luke Dick for about 5 years there, and as much as we wrote together, we just were friends. We'd hang on each other's back porch, and it's thanks to Luke that I got my dog Peggy Sue, and I think that's an important part of the songwriter, the co-writing relationship, is because it builds trust, is really just kind of having a heart-to-heart with somebody. I feel that way about Jay Knowles, who I wrote Half Drunk with, my buddy Travis Meadows, and Jeremy Spillman. I've been writing with Jeremy Spillman since my first album, Rubber Band. We wrote How I Learned to Pray together, and Old Time's Sake from Beginning of Things, and now Fist Through This Town. That was also with Travis Meadows. But I'll also turn this question on its head and say, another way to look at this is my favorite co-writer is myself. And I say that to encourage all the writers out there. Don't be afraid to write more by yourself. Finish those songs by yourself because you learn a lot, not just about songwriting, but about yourself, and kind of splitting your brain into and creating that dialogue you'd normally have with a co-writer, but with your own self. It's a valuable skill, and it's cool when you can finish a song by yourself, like I did on Sugarcane, the song, and the song For the Love, and be proud of that work and kind of high-five yourself and say, all right, I like this guy. He's a pretty decent writer. Helps build the kind of confidence that's useful in the co-writing room. All right, here's one from Benjamin Burke Official. How much of the guitar soloing you do live is improvised, and how much is premeditated? It's a great question, Benjamin. I do believe in honoring the record. If I was in Leonard Skinner, I would want to play the solo to Working for MCA like it is on the record, the solo for Freebird and Sweet Home Alabama like it is on the record. People showed up in the seats to hear that. But let's say I'm taking a song like my song Tools of the Trade, and we're going to jam out at the end, play 4 or 5 solos. It's anybody's guess as to how that's going to end up. There's a lot more improvisation in that scenario for me. But the way that I look at improvisation is I have licks, maybe a lick that or a place on the guitar neck that I'm really at home living around. And so I'll use those as my Lego blocks, right? And it may be a lick I've played my whole life, maybe a lick I just figured out and I'm trying to wrap my fingers around. But I jump from Lego block to Lego block, and in between, the getting from one place to another, I let improvisation really take over. I don't know where I'm going to land. And kind of like on that part of Sugarcane, sometimes I fall on my face, but in getting out of the mistake, in painting myself in a corner and somehow getting out of that corner, you find these really beautiful things. And I've noticed a phenomenon, which is sometimes I'll play a guitar solo, think it was terrible, hear it back from someone's YouTube video at that show, or maybe it's playback in the studio, and turns out that guitar solo is a lot better than I thought it was. The opposite's also true. I play a solo, I think, man, that's the best solo I ever played, and then I hear it back, and I'm like, there's no soul in that, and I'm playing 20 too many notes, you know. But yeah, that's my philosophy on soloing. Appreciate that question. All right, last up, y'all. And before we get out of here, I just want to encourage everyone, keep those questions coming in the comments section down here. Sometimes on Instagram and my stories, I'll post for y'all to ask me a question. That's where I got a lot of these. I've got a Q&A on the profile of my TikTok page, Facebook, all of it, Twitter. I'm looking for these questions, and I love answering them. And I particularly love taking the time to answer them here on YouTube, where I can go a little deeper into my answer. But we're going to wrap up from a question from AMC Kahan. AMC Kahan asks, weed or beer? Well, I must admit, I have obviously sung a few songs about the Devil's Lettuce that I wrote. One in particular I recorded with Old Crow. That was a whole lot of fun to perform live. The crowds really seemed to get into it. And I love great beer. I'm a big pale ale drinker, Good People IPA. To speak to the question about where to go in Nashville if you're visiting, I'm a big fan of Tennessee Brew Works. They have a sweet potato stout that's delicious, amongst other delicious beers. I dabble in the IPAs. I love a good Guinness, a proper Guinness, not too cold, and preferably on Irish ground where it's fresh and just extra magical. But today, I'm going to do y'all one better. I'm not going to go with either of those, because here lately I've been drinking a little bit of this George Dickel bourbon. It's their latest offering, and it is delicious. If you're a whiskey drinker, get in on this, y'all. And it's actually a pretty affordable bottle, too. I love something that is blue collar in price, but also just really, really good. And this is a steal. It's great whiskey. And so with that, if it wasn't 10 in the morning, I'd have a glass with me and cheers y'all. But cheers, y'all, and see you down the road.